What defines a series? It's funny because just now I was rewatching anyway, the trailer for Lords of Shadow 2, as in Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, which is the sequel to easily one of my favorite action games of all time, Castlevania Lords of Shadow, easily one of the most underrated games of 2010. It was beautiful, it was phenomenal. The graphics were fantastic, the storytelling and presentation were top notch. The ideas, concepts, and just general feel of it were obviously classic Castlevania done in a new setting, a new way. It borrowed a lot of action elements from games like God of War, games like Devil May Cry, and so on, and really just sort of built a game in and of itself that was just a fantastic experience from start to finish. Yeah, that's just me sort of giving praise to that series. And Lords of Shadow 2 is coming out now, and they released a trailer before E3, which was, well, just fantastic because it builds upon the end of Lords of Shadow, which was quite a shock, basically, which is different to the rest of the Castlevania series. And in fact, that's kind of the point at which where this sort of talk starts. And it's because, in the first place, the original Lords of Shadow was actually a departure from the usual Castlevania formula. It was going to be a reboot that Hideo Kojima, obviously famous for the Metal Gear Solid series, took a step back to think about how they want to make the series come across. A revitalization, a reboot, whatever you want to call it, and just create a new story in itself instead of following the normal Castlevania canon, which a lot of the Castlevania, if not all the Castlevania titles, have done up until this point. And Castlevania Lords of Shadow was a huge success, got really good reviews, but at its core, despite all the good things going for it, and this isn't actually a fault of the game, not all the fans were pleased. Of course they wouldn't be. I mean, you can't please everyone, but even then, the problem isn't so much that. In fact, the talk that I'm going to have briefly isn't necessarily about the game itself, but it's about people's reactions to it, because like I said, you can't please everyone. And it's that the game was different. Now, what defines a series is a very strange idea indeed, because do we define a video game series by one thing? Do we take the first idea that a video game series started off with and then use that rule, that standard, to apply to the rest of the series? If that were the case, then surely a lot of games have already failed in that aspect, because a lot of games have changed throughout their sequels. But then again, we have to think of what the original concept is. Is the original concept of a video game the very first starting idea, let's just say in the Devil May Cry series, and I actually talked about Devil May Cry, this So I Heard You Like Devil May Cry series, is the very first idea of Devil May Cry, which is Dante, a devil hunter, slaying demons. That's the original concept. And that has not changed throughout any of the games. And even with this new DMC Devil May Cry 1 coming out, it's still Dante, slaying demons and such. So really the idea itself hasn't actually really changed at all. And the same thing with Castlevania. It's still medieval fantasy world with magic and spells involving Dracula and the Belmonts, vanquishing evil and all that. Usually with a whip, the vampire killer, the sort of chain and cross and all that. But the point is that a lot of people, a lot of fans, a lot of the community for a lot of games, be it from playing the first game or maybe playing a lot of its sequels, sometimes get attached to a certain way of doing things, which is of no fault of their own, understandably, because you like a game series for what it does. And I could go to great lengths to talk about change and how people react to change, but I kind of did that in the Devil May Cry rant. This isn't really for that. This talk specifically is about what defines, what makes this core of a series, what determines how we look at a series, and whether it changing actually ruins the core product. And in my opinion, what defines a series or what defines a game isn't set in stone. It never has been. I mean, I feel like sometimes as consumers, as fans of a series, we put too many self-imposed rules, too many ideas of our own onto a game series which we don't own, necessarily speaking. We don't have any control over beyond fan feedback and input saying we like this, we didn't like this. At the end of the day, a game developer can choose to make a game how he wants, and what defines a series isn't truly down to us at all. That's why it always bugs me when people say things like, you know, insert game here isn't a true, game in the series, or insert game here because it's changed this or it's done this and that. I mean, take a look at Castlevania. Not all the games are exactly the same. The 3D Castlevanias, Lament of Innocence, Curse of Darkness, and of course Lords of Shadow, they all change a lot themselves, besides the specific changes within the series, i.e. Castlevania 64, Castlevania Area of Sorrow, Harmony of Dissonance, and so on, all have differences. And, like I said, you can nitpick these differences till the cows come home, but these are all different things. But to me, what defines a series is just an idea that was started in the first place. Metal Gear Solid, the idea was tactical espionage action, and it's changed throughout the series, for each iteration, from Metal Gear Solid 1 to 4, and its many spin-offs and changes and all that, such as the Twin Snakes and Subsistence, and so on. And now they've got Metal Gear Rising come out, which isn't Solid anymore. It's Metal Gear. And see, I understand that the idea of Metal Gear Solid series was stealth, but that was Solid because it was centered around Solid Snake. Metal Gear Rising is about Raiden. It's about Metal Gear. And people can't seem to get over the fact that they don't have to like this game. It isn't a stealth game. It's an action game meant to be based on the idea of Raiden, on the idea of, like lightning bolt action, a ninja with powers and such like. I mean, I look at the Ratchet and Clank series, and that game series, has come so far from the very first game I played. If you look at, what is it? A Crack in Time, All for One, and this new Ratchet and Clank coming out, and you compare it to the very first Ratchet and Clank on PS2, the differences will blow your mind. Of course, a series near and dear to my heart, the Call of Duty series. You look at Call of Duty 1, and you look at Black Ops 2, the difference is huge, and so on. And yeah, in before Call of Duty never changes. Ha ha ha, I'm not going to argue with you about that one because I find that argument so stupid. But, in fact, what bothers a lot of the fans are how much things change, actually. In fact, I'd say that Call of Duty fans are more bothered by what changes than what doesn't change, ironically. And, see, I'm accused of liking too much at once. I'm accused of liking too many things. I'm accused of not really understanding how some people feel because I like a lot of stuff. And I understand that, because I widen my interests. I'm not, interested in one thing. But, I mean, do you have to hate me just because I like a lot of things? It's like, I'm not just restricted to one genre, one thing, one idea. I like a multiplicity of things. I don't like everything, don't get me wrong. I don't like every song, every movie, every game. I just like a lot of them. So when something changes, I'm not as hurt as some people might be, but it really depends. And when a concept changes, what defines a series alters somewhat. I'm not truly destroyed by it because I know that a game series can't be exactly the same for each new iteration without changing even the slightest thing. Because moving forward in a game series means doing different things with your games. You can't stay exactly the same, or else it would just be the same game. Would Ratchet and Clank Going Commando have been a progressive game, a different game to the original Ratchet and Clank, if it was just Ratchet and Clank, just taking that, the first Ratchet and Clank game, and just reproducing it, but adding nothing? That makes no sense. Then it's not a sequel. Then you might as well just release the same game again. But what purpose does that make? Change happens when new TVs are developed. Isn't the next TV different to the last one? You're not going to just make the same TV. I mean, you can go into the ideas of improvements or changes cosmetically or technically, but the point is, when you're making a new product, you're making it a new thing, a unique thing on its own. You know, the Final Fantasy series, and this is where a heap of arguments then start flooding in. The Final Fantasy series is a series known for its dynamic, unique games, partially partially is the wrong word. Specifically because every single game is different to the last. And yet, a lot of fans criticize different FFs because of their differences, when in the first place there was never one set in stone formula for an FF game in the first place. Every single FF is an RPG. All of them are. It doesn't matter if they were action RPG, turn-based, active time battle like the majority of them are, or whatever. They're all RPGs. They're all different games, and it bothers me so much when people feel like we are the ones who define a series, even though we're the ones not making them. It's like it's your opinion, your perspective, you're looking at a series and how you basically try to impose your ideas on it, but your rules, your ideas are not the ones of the developers, they're not the ones of the people making the games. So I feel that it's not up to us to criticize what defines a series, or to act as if what defines a series has always been set in stone, when it's not. As time goes on, as series get bigger, more popular, more successful, they have the right and liberty to expand and do what they want with it. I think fans have to either accept change or just move on, because at the end of the day, a game series cannot keep the same fans forever. It will make fans and lose some, but make new ones. Not every single game is meant for the same person. I mean, if you believe that a game series is meant to please, let's just say, 10 people like a game. If the next game in that series pleases all 10 of those people, again, that would be a miracle, because let's just say 6 out of 10 people like it from the previous game, but 4 out of 10 don't. Maybe a new 4 out of 10 will then move in. They'll like that game. And then the next game, let's just say 4 of the original 10 like it. 2 new people like that game, or maybe we lose some of the ones who like the second one, and so on. By, let's just say, the 5th or 6th game, it would be surprising if we still have an original fan left. We might have 10 completely new fans, and so on. I mean, you get the picture. The point is that what defines a series, in my opinion, I know this is going to sound very metaphysical, but what defines the series is the series itself. It's the choices a game series decides to make in its direction are what defines each and individual game. And if you look at every entry in the game series, you'll notice a common trend, and it doesn't have to be particularly micro. It has to be a superordinate trend that makes some sort of sense. So yeah, I think what defines a series is just something that is not necessarily down to the consumer, but it's something down to the developer, and I feel that it's something that as consumers we should enjoy, or just not enjoy. The choice is ours, right? Yeah, I think that's about it, really.